This is Sid, and you're listening to The Economic Story. In this episode, we will talk about inflation numbers coming out of Canada. Today is Feb 28th, 2024, and Canada reported inflation numbers earlier this morning. Here is a snapshot. Inflation month over month came out at 0.0%. Expectation was 0.4%. Inflation year over year was 2.9% and expectation was 3.3%. Core inflation, which does not include energy and food, core inflation month over month was 0.1% and core inflation year over year was 2.4%. Overall, the 6 to 9 month trend for inflation rate appears to be heading towards the minus 0.1% mark, while the trend for core inflation appears to be heading towards the 0% mark. This data point and the trend picture leads us to ask a few questions. Well, the first one is, can we declare victory over inflation, at least during the most recent battle? Number two is, are we on the verge of flipping over into deflation? Number three, is the Bank of Canada ready for this economic turn? Well, I won't tell you I have all the answers. The fight with inflation and deflation is a day-to-day thing. Every day, you almost start from square one. With that being said, though, the numbers don't lie. And of course, they don't lie unless you cook the books or the numbers get revised away. And let's assume that these numbers didn't go through either of those. So these numbers are clearly pointing towards the fact that the most recent battle with inflation has been won, at least the latest episode. And the bigger risk right now appears to be deflation. And it's time to prepare for that. With that being said, we can't ignore some of the X factors that are out there. Those being, number one, we are highly integrated with the global economy via the currency and the trade markets. And a complete out-of-step move could result in a currency devaluation, which might hasten the return of inflation because lower currency buying out imports at higher costs could result in an increased valuation or pricing of those imported goods. Number two, of those global integrations, our deepest integration is with the US. So be it leading or lagging, we ought to be roughly in step with the US. The issue is that US is undergoing an economic boom, while the situation in Canada is not that great. None of that boom from US has spilled over into Canada, or most of it hasn't yet. There are some talks about some future projects, but let's see. Well, this creates a structural issue that needs to be resolved between the fiscal and the monetary policies so that in general they can move in lockstep and create the best outcome for the Canadian economy. Going back to some of those X factors, number three being the Volcker resurgence, which continues to be an ongoing risk. I wouldn't go into this very deep subject. Another episode some other day, probably. Anyways, all that being said, it does feel like that Canada has got through a lot of pain to get this inflation down. And now it's time that we send some relief on its way. Hope the future is brighter for Canada. Thanks all. That's it for this episode.